The rooftop is full of people holding champagne they didn't pay for. Down below, Biscayne Bay is catching the last orange light of the evening. Up here, string lights are strung across steel beams that still smell a little like fresh paint. A jazz trio is playing something soft in the corner. Waiters move through the crowd with trays of stone crab and little toast points, and nobody's really eating them, they're just holding them, because everybody up here is more interested in being seen than in eating. At the front of the room, under a banner that says The Foundry, Grand Opening, a man in a navy suit is standing behind a podium with a microphone in his hand. His name is Daniel Cole, and right now, he's smiling the kind of smile that took him years to practice. When I first saw this building, everybody told me I was crazy, a run-down warehouse in Wynwood, but I saw what it could be. I saw the vision. A woman in a red dress is standing just off to his left, her hand resting on his arm like she belongs there. Her name is Bianca. She's smiling too, but she's not really listening. She's checking to see who's filming. Tonight, Daniel says, we're not just opening a building, we're opening the future of Miami real estate, and I built this with my own 2 hands. The audience applauds. Somebody near the bar lets out a whistle. And that's the exact moment the elevator doors at the back of the room slide open. 3 people step out. 2 of them are wearing FBI windbreakers. The third one is a woman in a plain black blazer, her hair pulled back, no jewelry, nothing flashy. She's not smiling. She's not here to be seen. She's here because she has been waiting for this moment for 11 months. Her name is Rachel Bennett. And in about 90 seconds, Daniel Cole's entire life is going to fall apart in front of every investor, every reporter, and every camera in that room. But to understand how we got here, we have to go back about a year and a half, to a warehouse on NW 2nd Avenue that nobody wanted, and a woman who saw something in it that nobody else did. Mrs. Stark here, and today I want to tell you about the most expensive lie a man ever told the woman he was supposed to marry. Rachel Bennett had been a commercial real estate broker in Miami for almost 9 years by the time this story starts. She worked out of a small boutique firm in Brickell called Bayview Commercial Realty, one of those offices where everybody knows everybody and the real money deals get done over Cuban coffee, not conference calls. She was good at her job, really good. The kind of good that comes from doing it the hard way, knocking on doors, sitting through zoning board meetings that ran past midnight, building relationships with property owners who didn't trust anybody from a big firm. That's exactly how she found the warehouse on NW 2nd Avenue. It belonged to an elderly man named Mr. Farrow, who'd owned it since the 70s. Back when Wynwood was mostly garment factories and nobody was painting murals on the walls yet. His kids didn't want it. He didn't want to deal with it anymore, and every big developer who'd approached him over the years had made him feel like a problem to be solved instead of a person to talk to. Rachel didn't do that. She brought him a box of pastelitos from a bakery 2 blocks from his house and sat with him for 2 hours before they ever talked numbers. By the time she was done, she had a deal on the table. $4.8 million for a 5-story warehouse that, once permitted and redeveloped into mixed-use retail and office space, could be worth 11, maybe 12 million. That's not a small deal. That's a career-making deal. And Rachel had done it almost entirely on her own. Now, at the same time all this was happening, Rachel was engaged. Her fiancé was a man named Daniel Cole. Daniel ran a small real estate investment company, Cole Capital Group, small being the important word there. He did okay, a few flipped condos, a couple of rental properties in Doral, but nothing like what Rachel was putting together. And if you knew Daniel, even a little, you'd pick up on something under the surface. A tightness in his jaw whenever somebody at a party asked Rachel about work before they asked him. He never said it out loud. Guys like Daniel usually don't. But you could feel it. The way he'd changed the subject a little too fast.
the way he'd laugh at his own jokes about being the arm candy a little too loud. Rachel didn't see it as a problem. She loved him. She figured that's just what insecurity looks like sometimes, and it would pass once things settled down. So when the one-wood deal started coming together, she did what a lot of people in a relationship do. She brought him in. "I want you to be part of this," she told him one night, spreading the numbers out across their kitchen table in their Brickell condo. "I can't do the redevelopment side alone. You know construction, you know permitting. Let's do this together." Daniel looked at those numbers for a long time. Then he said the thing that changed everything. "Rach, listen, if we buy this under my LLC, Cole Capital, we save a fortune on taxes. Pass-through structure, depreciation, all of it. My accountant already ran some numbers for a different deal. It's night and day. If it's under your name or under Bayview, you're getting hit personally. This way, we protect ourselves." He said we. He said ourselves. He was already planning the wedding after all. Why would it matter whose name was on the paperwork? He added, "You'll obviously be listed as a manager on the LLC, 50-50. Once we're married, it's community property anyway. This is just smart." Rachel had handled hundreds of transactions. She knew LLCs. She knew tax structures. Some of what he said wasn't even wrong. On paper, LLCs do have real benefits for commercial holdings. But she trusted him more than she questioned him. That's her mistake, and it's a mistake a lot of good, smart people make. Trust doesn't ask for proof. That's what makes it trust. So Rachel handed over her negotiated price, her relationship with Mr. Farrow, her contacts at the title company, her contractor bids. 9 years of relationships, folded neatly into a deal that was about to close under somebody else's name. She signed as the broker of record, which was standard. She was the licensed professional facilitating the transaction. But the ownership? That went to Cole Capital Group LLC. Just Daniel's name, not hers.
The deal closed on a Tuesday in March. Rachel remembers it specifically because she cried a little in the parking lot of the title company afterward. Happy tears, relief tears. 9 months of work, finally done. Daniel took her to dinner that night at a steakhouse on Ocean Drive to celebrate. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than her monthly car payment. He toasted to our future. For about 3 weeks, everything felt normal, maybe even better than normal. Daniel was affectionate, attentive. He talked about permits and architects and timelines like he was genuinely excited to build something with her. Then, slowly, things started to shift. He started going to meetings without telling her, meetings with investors, meetings with a marketing team he'd hired. When she asked about it, he'd wave it off. "Just handling logistics, babe. Don't worry about it." He stopped asking for her opinion on the redevelopment plans. When she offered feedback on the tenant mix, she'd suggested a mix of local Wynwood businesses instead of chain retailers, something that would actually fit the neighborhood. He told her that decision was already made. By her? No, by him. Then, one night in June, about 3 months after closing, Rachel came home from a showing to find 2 suitcases sitting by the front door of their condo. Hers. Daniel was sitting on the couch, not looking at her. Space? "Daniel, we're getting married in 5 months. "I don't think we should do that anymore," he said, still not looking at her. She asked why. She asked what happened, whether it was something she did, whether they could talk about it. He gave her nothing, just vague lines about growing in different directions and needing to focus on the business. The business. His business. Cole Capital, the one that now legally owned an $11 million building that she had found, negotiated, and built from nothing. She moved into her sister's spare room in Coral Gables that week, taking 2 suitcases and a box of clothes, leaving behind a life she thought she was building with someone. It gets worse. 6 weeks later, a mutual friend sent Rachel a link to an Instagram post.
Daniel, at a rooftop bar in South Beach, arm around a woman named Bianca Reyes, a model with about 200,000 followers who did brand partnerships for skincare and protein powder. The caption under the photo said something like, "New chapter, new energy." Rachel put her phone down and didn't pick it up again for 2 days. Then, in September, it got worse than worse. Daniel gave an interview to a local business journal about emerging developers to watch in Miami. In it, he talked about the Wynwood warehouse project at length. He talked about finding the property, negotiating with the seller, structuring the deal. He never once mentioned Rachel's name, not as a broker, not as a partner, not as anything. He told the reporter he'd spotted the opportunity himself and built the relationship with the seller from the ground up. Rachel read that article sitting at her sister's kitchen table at 11 at night, and her hands were actually shaking by the time she got to the end of it. 9 years of relationships, 9 months of work, a property she found by bringing an old man pastries and sitting with him for 2 hours. And in Daniel's version of the story, none of it existed. None of her existed. She thought about calling him. She thought about a lot of things: screaming, crying, showing up at his office, posting the truth online for everyone to see. She did none of those things. Instead, she sat there in the quiet kitchen, and something in her went very, very still.
Here's the thing about Rachel that Daniel never fully understood, even after 8 years together. When Rachel got hurt, she got quiet. And when Rachel got quiet, she got dangerous. Not dangerous in a loud way, dangerous in the way a good broker is dangerous. Patient, thorough, and completely unwilling to make a move until she had every fact lined up. About 2 weeks after that article came out, Rachel needed to pull an old comp analysis for a completely unrelated client. She logged into her brokerage's transaction management software, the same platform, Dotloop, that every deal at Bayview ran through, to find some old paperwork from a different project. And while she was in there, she noticed something. The Winewood file was still accessible to her since she'd been the broker of record. She hadn't looked at it in months. She didn't want to. But that night, something made her click into it. There, in the closing documents, was a form she didn't remember signing, a broker of record release and commission waiver. Her signature was on it. Her commission, roughly $144,000, 3% of the deal, gone, waived, signed away. Rachel stared at that signature for a long time. It looked like hers, close enough that a stranger wouldn't question it, but Rachel had signed her own name probably 10,000 times in her career. She knew her own handwriting the way you know your own face in the mirror. And something about the loop in the R was wrong. Too rounded, too careful, like someone tracing rather than writing. Then she looked at the date on the document, March 4th. She opened her calendar on her phone with hands that had gone cold. On March 4th, she had been in Orlando, a 3-day continuing education conference for her broker's license. She had the flight confirmation still in her email, a hotel receipt from a Marriott near the convention center, a parking ticket from the airport garage because she remembered complaining about how expensive it was. She could not have signed a document in a Miami title company office on a day she was 235 miles away. Rachel sat there in her sister's kitchen with her laptop open, and for a moment she just felt sick. Actually sick, stomach-turning sick. Because this wasn't just heartbreak anymore. This wasn't just a man who fell out of love with her. This was forgery on a legal document tied to a multi-million-dollar transaction using her professional license. If that document was fraudulent and used to close the deal, then Daniel Cole hadn't just cheated her out of a commission, he'd committed a crime. Rachel didn't call Daniel. She thought about it for about 10 seconds, and then she didn't. Instead, the next morning, she called her friend Priya Shah, who'd been a real estate attorney for over a decade and had handled title disputes before. She met Priya at a coffee shop in Coconut Grove, laid her laptop on the table and showed her everything: the signature, the date, the flight records, the article where Daniel erased her from the deal entirely. Priya went quiet for a while, scrolling through it all. "Rachel, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Do not call him, do not confront him, do not post about this. The second he knows you found this, he has time to cover his tracks, delete emails, get his story straight." So what do? You build a file, quietly. Everything, every email, every text, every closing document, the flight records, the article where Daniel erased her from the deal entirely. Then you take it to two places: the Florida real estate regulators, and if it's as bad as I think it is, the FBI. Wire fraud on a deal this size, involving forged documents sent through email and processed through a title company, that's federal. Rachel didn't sleep much that week, but she also didn't cry much either. She spent her evenings after her regular showings and client calls building a folder: emails going back 2 years, text threads where Daniel had pushed her to put the deal under his LLC, the original comp analysis she'd written up for Mr. Farrow's property, time-stamped months before Daniel ever got involved, her flight and hotel confirmations from Orlando, screenshots of his interview where he took full credit. Then she requested a formal handwriting comparison from a certified document examiner, quietly, on her own dime. The report came back 4 weeks later: 94% confidence that the signature on the broker of record release was not a natural signature, meaning it likely had been traced or copied rather than written freehand. In November, Rachel filed a formal complaint with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, the agency that oversees real estate licensing in the state. A week later, she sat down with an agent from the FBI's Miami field office, a woman named Agent Cruz, and laid the entire file out on the table. Agent Cruz looked through it for almost 40 minutes without saying much. Then she looked up at Rachel. "This is a lot of documentation. You built this well." "I had time," Rachel said quietly, "and a reason. We'll need to verify a few things independently: bank records, the title company's files, communications with the seller. This kind of investigation doesn't move fast. I want to be honest with you about that." Rachel nodded. "I'm not in a hurry. I just want it done right." And so, for the next several months, Rachel went back to work. She didn't tell friends what was happening other than Priya. She didn't tell her family the full story. She took new listings, she closed 2 smaller deals, she rebuilt, slowly, a life that didn't have Daniel Cole in it. But quietly, in the background, federal investigators were pulling bank records from Cole Capital Group. They were requesting files from the title company. They were talking to the notary whose stamp appeared on that forged document, a notary who turned out had no memory of Rachel ever coming into the office that day, because she never had. Daniel had no idea any of this was happening. He was too busy planning his grand opening. By the following spring, the Wynwood building was finished. 5 stories of exposed brick and glass, retail space on the ground floor, offices above, exactly the kind of project that gets written up in Miami business magazines as a sign of a hot new developer to watch. Daniel planned a launch event that he wanted people to remember: a rooftop party, string lights, a jazz trio, investors flown in from New York and Chicago, 3 local news outlets confirmed to attend, Bianca on his arm in a red dress, because by now she'd become a fixture at these things. Useful for the photos, good for the brand. He stood at that podium and told a room full of people that he built this with his own 2 hands. He believed it by then, almost. That's the strange thing about a lie you tell enough times. Eventually, it starts to feel less like a lie and more like a story you're just telling correctly. What Daniel didn't know was that 3 days earlier, Agent Cruz had called Rachel. "We're ready to move," she said. "The evidence is solid. forgery, wire fraud, and a pattern that shows this wasn't a one-time thing. There were smaller instances on 2 of his other deals too. Once we started looking, we have a warrant. When? Rachel asked. There's an event Friday night, a launch party, public, high visibility. That's actually the safest place for us to make the arrest. No risk of him running, no risk of a confrontation somewhere private going wrong. Rachel was quiet for a second. I want to be there. You don't have to be. I know, Rachel said, but I found that building. I built that deal. I'm not going to watch it from a courtroom transcript. I'm going to watch it happen. So, on Friday night, while Daniel Cole stood under a banner that said, "The Foundry, Grand Opening," and told 200 people he built something entirely on his own, Rachel Bennett stood in the lobby downstairs in a plain black blazer, watching the elevator numbers climb. When the doors opened on the rooftop, nobody noticed at first. The jazz trio kept playing. Somebody near the bar was still laughing at a joke. Then the 2 agents in windbreakers started walking straight toward the podium, and the room went quiet, one cluster of people at a time, like a wave rolling backward through a crowd. Daniel was mid-sentence, something about the future of Miami real estate. He saw the agents first, then he saw Rachel. His face did something Rachel had never seen it do before. Not anger, not even shock exactly. Something closer to the look of a man watching a door close he didn't know was still open. Daniel Cole, Agent Cruz said, loud enough for the microphone still clipped near the podium to pick it up. You're under arrest for wire fraud and forgery in connection with the acquisition of this property. Somebody near the bar dropped a glass. It shattered against the concrete floor, and in the silence that followed, it sounded enormous. Bianca took a step back from Daniel, like he'd suddenly caught fire. A reporter near the back of the room already had her phone up, filming. "This is insane," Daniel said, his voice cracking in a way it never did in interviews. "This is a misunderstanding. I don't know what—" "You forged Rachel Bennett's signature on a commission waiver document," Agent Cruz said, calm, flat, professional. "We have a certified handwriting analysis, flight records placing her 200 miles away on the date in question, and a notary who has no record of her ever entering that office." The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in somebody's drink. Daniel's hands were shaking as the agents guided him away from the podium, actually shaking, the way hands shake when a person finally understands all at once that the story they've been telling themselves is over. He looked at Rachel as they walked him past her. "Rachel," he said, quiet now, almost pleading. "Rachel, please." She didn't raise her voice, she didn't gloat, she just looked at him, steady, and said the only thing she'd planned to say the entire 11 months she'd waited for this moment. "You should have just let me keep my name on the deal, Daniel." That was it. That was all. Then she turned and walked back toward the elevator, while behind her, a room full of investors who'd flown in from New York and Chicago started quietly checking flight times home. News of the arrest was everywhere by Monday morning. Miami's business press loves a good rise and fall story, and this one had everything. Forged documents, a stolen deal, a fiancé cut out and erased, a rooftop arrest in front of 200 witnesses. The fallout moved fast. Cole Capital Group's remaining investors pulled out within the week. 2 of them had already been quietly reviewing his other deals after the story broke and found smaller, similar patterns: inflated numbers, missing paperwork, deals that didn't hold up under a closer look. Within a month, the company filed for bankruptcy. The Foundry, the building Rachel had found, negotiated, and built, went into receivership. Daniel was charged with wire fraud and forgery at the federal level. Facing the weight of the evidence Rachel and the FBI had built, and knowing a trial would likely go badly for him, he took a plea deal. He pled guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, along with an order to pay restitution. Bianca, for what it's worth, was gone within the first week. No public statement, just quietly unfollowed and moved on to the next rooftop. Rachel's story was different. With the forged waiver thrown out as fraudulent, her original commission, $144,000, was restored. She also filed a civil suit against Cole Capital Group for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, and settled for an additional amount that, combined with her commission, came to just over $600,000. She didn't buy a rooftop condo. She didn't post about it online. She used it to open her own brokerage. Bennett Commercial Realty opened its doors the following spring in a small office in Brickell with big windows and her name on the glass in simple black letters. No LLC hiding behind it, no partner's name attached to protect anybody's ego, just hers. You know, I've told a lot of stories on this channel, but this one sticks with me. Because Daniel wasn't some cartoon villain twirling a mustache. He was just a man who got jealous of the woman he loved, and instead of growing up, he decided to take what wasn't his. And Rachel didn't win by screaming or by burning her whole life down out of anger. She won by staying quiet, staying smart, and letting the truth do the work for her. So here's my question for you tonight. If you were in Rachel's shoes and you found out the person you trusted most had forged your name to steal what you built, would you have done what she did? Waited, built the case quietly, and let it happen the right way? Or would you have confronted him the second you found out? Tell me down in the comments. I read every single one. I'm Mrs. Stark. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.